Today we're talking about Microsoft's Enterprise Mobility Suite, a combination of hybrid identity management, mobile device management, and information protection. So a little bit about myself. You can read it up on the screen as well. I've been working in information technology since 1991. I've worked with small to medium businesses. I've worked with mid-market providers and mid-market customers, as well as larger organizations. We're going to look at things with a little different perspective here than you might get at a Microsoft event, because I also have a significant background in security. And so we're going to look at some of the content here from a data-centric or from a security-centric point of view here as well. So that's a little bit about me, and we can move on. So one other thing to be aware of here, Microsoft had their TechEd event still in process in Barcelona. This is their final TechEd Europe, and they've made some announcements this week that talk about pieces of the enterprise mobility enterprise mobility suite, as well as some components specific to Azure and Intune and the components. So there are a number of changes, a lot of good things there, and I'm going to try and point those out as we go through the presentation. I also have a slide at the end that will talk about some pieces here, specifically in the wrap-up. So really, why is enterprise mobility important? This triangle isn't enterprise mobility. This triangle is really talking about information security. And the reason here, a lot of the time you'll look at enterprise mobility from the point of view of the devices, as we go from mainframes to PCs to laptops to mobile, and finally now to bring your own device, as a lot of organizations are contending with today. We're going to take the tack here from, as I said, from the view of the data with an eye to security. So the graphic you see here is called the CIA triangle. What it speaks to is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. If you're using a computer system, this basically is the three aspects of your data that makes the data useful. If you cannot, well, let me stay on track here. For small organizations, the main concern has been availability. I want to get the information I need anywhere, anytime. That need hasn't changed. Information has to be available, or it doesn't have usefulness to you. You can't get it. Larger organizations are looking at a lot more of this, and as regulatory concerns come into play and other needs, the smaller organizations are coming into this as well. So if you're looking at this, it's not just availability, it's integrity. Has the information been changed? Can it be changed? Who can change it? It's confidentiality. Who can access it? Because the ability to access and the ability to change are separate. So as we continue down that, there are oftentimes one or multiple solutions to provide specific capabilities that give you one or more aspects of improving your CIA. They may come from an auditor. They may be something mandated by statute or regulation. Maybe I said auditor. So those pieces then come in as a point solution, or something that's kind of driven by a product, and can lead to the false choice. Do you want your data to be accessible, or do you want it to be secure? So as we move into the Enterprise Mobility Suite here, what we want to do is not ask, how do I make this perfectly secure, but ask, what am I protecting, and how important is it to protect? So we need to look at all three sides of the triangle. Availability has not changed. Barriers to availability slow down the business, reduce your competitiveness and effectiveness, and ultimately that's reflected on the bottom line. But data needs to be reliable. So the integrity side speaks to safe storage, backups, change controls, limiting access to only the people who need the data. So it means it can't be tampered with by unauthorized users, and therefore it's more trustworthy. Really, the reverse of the old school shared file location where anyone can access, read, change, and resave data. The other thing that is a benefit with limiting access is confidentiality. There's a lot more than just limiting file permissions. For years, larger organizations and the ones with regulatory requirements have implemented things like data loss prevention and rights management solutions. These keep data from leaving the organization, or if it does, makes that data unusable to the person on the outside, so it can limit accessibility even after it's sent. So we're going to touch more on those near the end of the presentation today, and we'll discuss some of the cloud options around that. Before you can manage the data, and before you can really restrict access by users or groups or roles, there need to be some things in place. You need a data classification scheme. You need defined roles, things like HR, or maybe in larger organizations, that HR role might have multiple sub-roles, payroll, benefits, those sorts of things. You need to have rules determining who should be able to create, access, list, read, modify, and delete the data files. So if we look at an organization, with a one-man show, nothing's classified. The one person has to have access to everything. As you move into a smaller business, often nothing is classified, but it should be, because if there's too much access, everyone sees everything, and if there's too little access, people can't get to the material that they need to do their jobs. With medium and larger businesses, it depends on the organizational maturity. Oftentimes, the rights or the quote roles that are provided here are typically based more on the department than a specific role. So, for example, an organization that does sales, finance department as a role might need full access to be able to read all the transactions, update customer records as contacts change with information that comes in with payment, that sort of thing. Sales, you might have restrictions of visibility by territory or by assigned customer, or might have limits to changes to records after a transaction is made. People doing the implementation for this organization might need to be able to access the system for contacts, address information, as well as the specific goods or services sold to make sure that what's delivered is what was sold. So if you have accompanying documentation that's not stored within that system, you can use the same roles and the same groups to grant the same kinds of granular access in a file system or in a SharePoint library. So we have here a chart of some of the kinds of classification that you can work with based on the area, properties, and then values within that, just as a sample here. And now let's jump into the actual enterprise mobility suite. Once you have the roles defined, we still need identity management, infrastructure management, and the information protection to make it all work well together. Identity management, this is a huge full screen Microsoft presentation slide. I'm just going to touch on a little bit here. This is with Active Directory Premium. So you see in the top portion represents the cloud services and cloud providers, the software as a service type things that are out there. The bottom portion in the green is your on-premises Active Directory. Still, the vast majority of organizations have on-premise server used for authentication, to handle user logons, etc. What we can do with Azure Active Directory Premium is put your Active Directory into Microsoft's cloud, and yet keep it as your Active Directory. So that means that you still have the on-premise server. Information is synchronized through this right side here up to the Azure Active Directory servers with Microsoft, and then can be used not only to authenticate and give users access to Microsoft services, but to a lot more. You synchronize and federate that, and then that can provide single sign-on to cloud applications, pre-integration with things like Salesforce, Box, Dropbox, multi-factor authentication, etc. We're going to talk about these in a little more detail, slide by slide. So, with the Azure Active Directory, some other benefits that you get are being able to delegate access. One of the, sadly, one of the biggest time wasters, time requirements for help desks is dealing with password resets. So being able to delegate that to the users or to somebody in their work area, their department, can take a load off of the IT department and enhance security, because the person resetting the password is much more likely to know the person who's making that request. So it prevents a false password request, for example, that a help desk might grant somebody because they don't know in a large organization who specifically that is. But working with within a department, oh yeah, that's Bob, not a problem, and therefore it's more secure. Same thing with group management. Who should be a member of the group, who shouldn't, types of things can be delegated within that team to an executive assistant or a team manager. It provides company branded access portal to get to the software as a service apps. So instead of saving shortcuts or typing URLs into the browser or doing a web search and maybe finding the wrong page, you have the access panel to get right in. And really big one here, the multi-factor authentication. So some of you guys, if maybe you've used Hotmail even, or a number of other services, you've seen these things where it'll start to text to your phone, or maybe even ask you to have an application on your phone. What that provides is an additional piece for security. Ideally, to prove that you are you, we should have something that you have, something that you are, and something that you know. And by adding this additional factor, now it's not just a password, which might be written down or somebody else might know, but it's also something that you have, your cell phone, for example, or something you are, maybe your smart card or reading a fingerprint. So it adds a substantial amount of security by going to that multi-factor authentication. We talked about access to those cloud services. First time I went to look into this, there were already 1,200 plus near the start of this year. In May, it was up to 1,700 plus cloud services. And the last time I checked about a week ago, it was over 2,400 different services. So we're talking about things like Box.com, Dropbox, LinkedIn, etc. If your company has a LinkedIn page, for example, then what you can do is have a group-based access that anybody in the marketing department, or whichever one would need access to it, has a group account that their user account is able to proxy through and get to it. And that way, if there's turnover, if one person needs to be denied access, it's not just sharing a name and password that the other ones would know. It's actually granting, through the group membership, specific users access to get to it. So this is really, really powerful stuff that you simply can't do without identity management. The security reporting is also just mind-blowing. With the Azure Active Directory Premium, there's a higher level of it, and some of the really cool ones are things like impossible travel. If somebody logs on from Las Vegas and then 10 minutes later is logging in from Dallas, we know that there's no way a person can get from here to there. Hypothetically, for IT staff, there might be a situation where you're remoted into a system, but those are circumstances that security people would know about, or the IT people would know about. For a typical user, this is what's called impossible travel, and so that's something that would show up as a big red flag. Also, things like multiple failed logons, logging in from unknown devices, and we'll get to a little bit about devices in the next section here, and statistics on application use and those sorts of things. Really a whole bunch of security reporting available. The Azure Active Directory Premium and this whole Enterprise Mobility Suite is only purchasable today if you have an enterprise agreement, or I believe a Select Plus agreement with Microsoft. So if you don't have that, then there are ways to get large pieces of it. So for somebody who maybe is under 250 users, if you still want this functionality, we can get a lot of it through using Azure Active Directory Basic. There's still the self-service password change, directory synchronization, single sign-on for up to 10 applications, a subset of the security reports. So all of those things are really good. The biggest thing you lose here is the group-based provisioning, that things like that shared logon to LinkedIn, those sorts of things, and the custom branding. So let's continue and look at the infrastructure management. Within the infrastructure, what we're talking about here is mobile devices, workstations, mobile application management across the devices. And what we get with this is really device support for all of the ecosystems out there. Windows and Windows Phone, of course, and the Apple iOS devices and Android devices. The mobile device management platform also does allow selective wipe of apps and data. And there are a number of things that we didn't even get into this piece or into this presentation that Intune is going to be provided with some other Office 365 subscriptions starting next year. So some of the things that we get here, simplified registration and enrollment for Bring Your Own Device. A user can register their own device, enroll right into the Intune management service, and manage their device and install corporate apps through that company portal. Consistent access. This is really just enabling Bring Your Own Device. You can use a device of your choice as a user, regardless of your location. With the, sorry, little gap there. Automatic connection to your internal resources is a VPN as needed, and also single sign-on and automatic authentication with that device. Cross-platform access allowed through remote desktop apps, including Windows clients, Windows RT, Windows Phone, iOS, the Mac OS X, and Android devices. So we can provide those cross-platform access through remote desktop gateway, through pooled or personal virtual machine-based desktops, session-based desktops, virtualized applications. Any of those desired endpoints, things that the internal resources that the users are going to consume, are reachable through just the single application store. And then the last thing here, single user identity. So it doesn't matter if you're logging into the network, if you're logging into your email, which maybe is not on premises at this point, whether you're logging into a software as a service application like Salesforce or like Box.com, single username and password, single identity, and that provides access to the applications. With the infrastructure management, again, self-service access to get in, look at the devices that you as a user have enrolled. You can wipe a device if you lose it, or the IT department can get in and wipe or selectively wipe the device. And again, we're talking about those portal provisioned applications or data. So we can do over-the-air device enrollment. It doesn't have to be in the office or plugged into a PC or anything like that. Available applications can be targeted per user, per group. And then we can also pull device settings management and device inventory from that. So we'll walk through here how the enrollment works. They bring in with Workplace Join. That takes either an application on your Android or iOS device, put that on, it provides a certificate to the device, and then the device object is created in Active Directory. So through that, we can then publish access to the corporate resources through a web application proxy. It's basically, it's almost like a proxy in reverse. It's allowing people from outside to reach those internal services on the inside, whereas a traditional proxy server is something providing access the other way out. Again, multi-factor authentication with that Azure Active Authentication, basically that text to the phone or send a message to an application on the phone. Devices get enrolled in Intune, so then we have access to manage them through the company portal, and can also synchronize with the configuration manager. So you have unified management for on-premise and cloud devices. Here's just a sample of the portal where we could see here, for example, a sales dashboard application or a locator application, things like that. So this is a corporate branded self-service portal that would be reached through any of those native applications. Again, just continuing to manage these devices, settings can be applied through Intune. Settings can also be applied through the Exchange Server connector. There is a single security template that can be used to manage settings on all the devices. And then it determines, oh, okay, this user is on iOS, this user is on Android, and you're using one template. It's abstracting the hardware underneath, because it can determine, okay, here's the setting within iOS, or here's the setting within Android to require a 6-character password, or to require that the device is encrypted. So you don't have to know Android to do the management. You don't have to know iOS to do the management. You just need to know the desired setting and put it into that one security policy. There's reporting on those settings, and then settings conflicts. If you have a, let's say your iPhone, and we'll just pick on that, has connection to an Exchange server that has policies through ActiveSync. And then there's also management from Intune. Whichever of those is the more restrictive. So maybe Intune is set for 4-character password, ActiveSync, because you're also a mail user, is set for 6. That would force the more restrictive password, 6-character password policy. As we continue, we've got the same thing there. So that is infrastructure management in a nutshell. There's a whole lot more we can go into on this, but I want to make sure we hit all of the areas. The last one is the information protection. So as we're looking about rights management for the actual data that you're going to be storing and the data that people need to access. So challenges here, as people are bringing their own device, they still want to be able to get to the company information. And I have run into it in countless organizations, regardless of the regulation, regardless of the company policy. I, as the user, want to have a copy of that data on my laptop with me or on my device with me so that I can work with it regardless of if I'm connected, if I'm on a plane, if I'm working from home. But that's a huge liability for the company. The next thing to look at is a significant amount of company data can only be found locally on user devices. This is the, hey, I've created this content, I've put this presentation together, I've worked on this sales order, I've done whichever. And then maybe at most, I've emailed that to someone else, but it's not on a company file share. It's only on that user device where the content was actually created. So the organizational need here is secure that data, classify the data, and protect the data based on what it is, based on the content, not based on it being in the F drive, under the sales folder, under the Virginia territory, but based on what it is. And the need here is as well to maintain regulatory compliance. So we're talking about things like credit card data, So the whole PCI comes into play, or maybe medical data and HIPAA information. So the solutions here with this platform, with the mobility platform, users can work on the device of their choice, can be able to access all of the resources regardless of the location. IT can enforce central access and audit policies and protect information based on the content and can report on that. So let's look a little bit at how that works. Here's 3 different ways, starting with really kind of the oldest view and working to more current ways. It used to be centralize the data, access it through a terminal server, access it through VDI. And sure, that means the data is now stored on a server in the office, and you can get to it through this very restricted portal, this desktop or this published application that gives you the capability to access the data, but only when you're connected. So it becomes a problem for people that are very mobile or have intermittent connections, those sorts of things. So with the web application proxy, you can make those corporate resources, and it may be a file share, it may be an internal SharePoint site, those sorts of things can be available or not available based on specific attributes around the user, around the device, around whether that location is internal to the network or external to the network, and then the application itself. We can also use work folders and synchronize files on the corporate server with a store on your device from virtually anywhere. And then you're going, wow. So the good news here is the data that somebody is storing on their machine is now getting synchronized to my server, but it's still out there on their machine. So we're protecting that data not just on the server, but also on the machines with dynamic access control policies. So we can protect that as well. So with the Active Directory rights management services, we can safeguard data when it's distributed outside the corporate network by controlling whether a user can open, modify, print, forward, or take any other action with rights managed information. The rights management services protects Microsoft Office documents, Exchange email, and they just made an announcement about protected PDFs in this past week as well. So that then identifies the rights that the users have to the file and then limits the option for them to perform actions outside of those rights. Dynamic access control, we touched on just a little bit in the last slide, is automatically classifying data, including automatic encryption, and including applying rights management if applicable, and then being able to audit that. So IT can generate reports that shows which users have accessed classified information. And by classified, it's like we were talking at the start, classifying your data, not necessarily that it's top secret. So with the dynamic access control, here's some other things that can be done. Expression-based access control. So setting up fewer security groups by using conditional expressions, and I have a slide that'll break that down in just a moment. And also using the resource classification and user and device claims in those access conditions. So if we look at this, for example, the fewer security groups, let's say you have a huge multinational company, it's in 50 countries, you've got 50 groups, including the people who are working within each of those countries. Then you have 20 branches per country on average. So now that means 1,000 groups to handle who's in which location, and then we break it down by customers, 100 customers per branch. We're talking about 100,000 groups to be able to do a customer-specific, very granular access control. Really just a management nightmare, unless you go to conditional expressions, which is now supported. So at this point, you can say, for example, if it's a member of this country, in this case, US, and a member of the Seattle branch, there's our branch location, and this customer, then you can get into this file. So you're a customer rep for this, or maybe you're a person supporting that customer. You could get to that customer data. Somebody else who's a member of US and a member of the Seattle branch, but doesn't have that customer piece, wouldn't meet the conditional expression for all three. And so they wouldn't have access. So it really, really just, it makes it a lot easier to manage, a lot more granular capability there. So here's another way of looking at it. If we look at the, and that was talking about a user claim. So we can see things like the department user clearance here. This is a high clearance user coming in from a device. So now we're also looking at not only who you are, but the device you're coming in on, like we talked about before. Which device, and is it inside or outside the network? So in this case, the device is a laptop that is in the finance department. It is managed by the system. And by that does not necessarily mean that it's a company-owned device. It could still be something that this user has brought in, has registered and done a workplace join, and is being managed by the company's information protection systems here. And then looking at the resource that they're getting to. The department is finance, okay. User and group is good. Resource impact is high, the user clearance is high. So in this case, the access policy would allow that user to get in and access the resource. So with the Azure Rights Management, information protection can be delivered from the cloud. It can be delivered in a hybrid with your on-premises infrastructure, and it can be integrated into your native applications with an easy-to-use software development kit. If you're a software developer, I'm not, so I can't speak to the details of that particular piece. But if you're interested, we can certainly put you in touch with people who can. So let's look at the wrap-up for this. First of all, you must be, or you must become, an enterprise volume licensing customer to get the Enterprise Mobility Suite. However, if you're under 250 users, there are ways to get pieces of this and get close to what the Mobility Suite is. If you already have an enterprise agreement, Microsoft has some promotional pricing offers available there, and we would be happy to work with you in ways to optimize that licensing. So what we're talking about really is enabling, optimizing your enterprise mobility through people-centric IT, letting the users work on the devices of their choice, providing consistent access to corporate resources regardless of where they are, what device they're coming in on. The really big one for me, protecting your data, making sure that corporate information stays corporate information and doesn't get out there, that there isn't some kind of data breach or something that puts your company on the front page of the paper, and just manage that risk. And then unifying the environment, delivering a unified application and device management on-premise and in the cloud. And that's that synchronization between Intune and System Center, so you can actually see devices across the board through those. So a couple other things that are the recent updates. From TechEd Europe, there is now an Azure Active Directory sync, which is replacing the previous DirSync and Forefront Identity Manager functionality. So that allows synchronization between on-premise Active Directory and the Azure Active Directory, including multi-forest on-premise implementations. There are updates to Intune. So more detailed management, comprehensive management of Office mobile apps, putting management technology around your line of business application, and providing more secure mobile application viewing and conditional access on those. So that's coming out in just the next few months. More mobile device management for Office 365. So Again, if you can't get the entire enterprise mobility suite, this is a way that smaller organizations can get some big pieces of that. That's coming early next year. Updates to the Active Directory Premium, so an application proxy allowing on-premise applications to be published to external users, and on-premise access for directory synchronizations. And then again, very exciting for me, the data loss prevention technology extended across Office 365. So it's really across the board there. Let's open things up for a little Q&A here. If